question of the place of music in the teaching is not immediately clear. For one thing, Gurdjieff, as far as I know, never made any kind of statement about why he composed this large body of music. The most obvious thing one could say is that there are certain things that exceed the possibility of words to express. And there is something that is expressed in music which seems to fall on a part of the listener that nothing else can accomplish. Gurdjieff spoke about three foods: food as the first food, about air as the second, and impressions as the third. Now, certainly music falls under the category of impressions. One has an impression of music. So one has to accept the fact that music is food. And if it is food, it feeds something in us, which nothing else feeds.
It is tempting to believe that ideas are for the head and movements for the body and music for the feelings.
Yes.
But it's really plainly obvious to me that any idea worth its salt, obviously it's just a bunch of words unless it evokes a very deep feeling and a corresponding sensation. And similarly in the movements. After all, they're not just for the body. In fact, Paul Renard used to say the movements are for the mind. And so similarly music, as you're saying now.
And in fact, my question would be, if one listens to Gurdjieff's ideas purely with the head, purely with the intellect, how can they ever possibly reach their full objective?
I guess I'd like to open to another direction, if I might, and that is really what does it mean to use the phrase sacred music? And what is the quality that we can express as being sacred about music? And I would assume you would say that certainly the Gurdjieff to Hartmann music has a quality of being sacred music. And what is that?
Well, I'd like to begin with sort of approaching this question with something that was said by Gurdjieff about art in general. He said that in ancient times, the function of art was quite different from what it has become today. It was in no sense, shall we say, a form of entertainment, something to be enjoyed, even entertainment on the highest level. But rather it was a form in which real knowledge about man and his relation to the cosmos was put in an encoded form into certain works of art, which were like books. They were repositories of knowledge about man, and were encoded in this way so that they could pass through the generations without distortion. It was not in the form of ideas and words, but in the form rather of images or sounds or some form in which they could remain unsullied by misunderstanding and various other kinds of distortion. It seems to me that every great work of art, it has to some degree to contain some element of the sacred. Music was considered to be composed as a kind of microcosm, as a kind of model of the universe in which all the essential processes of the cosmos were shown in miniature by way of this extraordinary relationship of different sound frequencies. Gurdjieff said music was all mathematics. And in a way, he's really quite right. And that's not to demean it at all. The entire universe is mathematics, perhaps at a level which we can't even begin to envision or imagine. So music at one time was not there as a source of pleasure. It was there as something to contain truth, to contain true knowledge. And to me, that is really, in a way, the definition of sacred art. Something which, a form which relates itself to higher and finer vibrations and to higher and finer knowledge, if one can accept the fact that those phenomena exist.
How you've opened to this I find very helpful, Larry, and it opens then really, and you even mentioned the term subjective a moment ago, opens to the idea of objective art, and then specifically the idea of objective music. And you once, I believe, wrote something to the effect that really it is the quality of objective music to have a relationship of the vibrations, and the vibrations of objective music have an effect on people in the same way, and that is repeatable. If I understood a little bit about what you were writing, and I'm paraphrasing it, could you speak to that also?
In the case of music, music being the most precise of all the arts, because it is absolutely pure mathematics. It relates to mathematical relationships. That's what music is made of. Different rates of vibration in relation to each other. And so my feeling is that there is already in music itself something objective about its relationship to the human organism. That is, we are responding to certain vibrational combinations which are coming into our bodies, and which something, in an extraordinary way, something in the body seems to resonate in a kind of sympathetic vibration with what is coming in.
Yes.
And so you speak to any musician, and even a non-musician, in listening to a certain melody, when they will say, "Oh, that note is so wonderful, that particular note." Why is it that we all respond to that particular note? There is something that is not merely subjective there. We're already approaching something more objective. But on the other hand, I do feel that even though there is some objectivity, that the intent of the creator of the art is crucial. For example, I think let's take something that is unquestionably a sacred work of art. Let's say the St. Matthew Passion of Bach. Who could argue with that? Is that sacred music? It certainly is. Now, why is it sacred? This is to approach your question, Ravi. Johann Sebastian Bach once said, "Every note that I have ever composed was dedicated to the glory of God." And he meant it. I mean, that was his, it couldn't be otherwise with him. So the intent was absolutely on the highest possible level. He was calling on himself, making a demand on himself to produce something which would be worthy for God to hear. I mean, it's to put it in a very sort of simple way. Very well, so we can depend pretty much on the intention of the creator. But now we're going to hear this music. In order for us to hear it, it has to be reproduced by an orchestra, by singers, by a conductor, by this whole mechanism. Now, what does it mean if one of the singers is singing an aria, but suddenly in her mind she's thinking about the quarrel that she had with her husband that morning? What does that do to how does that affect the transmission of the sacred impulse that came from Bach? You can magnify that and multiply it by 1,000 different things. Then you come to the listener. What in the listener is able to receive this sacred impulse? He may be in the same subjective state. He may be he may have a headache, or he may be worried about the unpaid bills. How much of that is going to be able to allow him to receive this sacred art? So, in a certain way, in order for sacred art to be communicated, there has to be a clear channel somehow for these impulses to arrive.
This question of that music is ultimately all mathematics, somehow, actually having some background in mathematics, I keep having some doubt about this question. Not that it is not mathematics, but the same notes can be very accurately produced by a computer. It doesn't carry the same feeling. And I actually have very much the impression that it is a slightly higher order kind of mathematics, which is not what we ordinarily teach in mathematics.
Yes.
That in a way, I mean, you yourself were just giving this example. If the singer or the piano player is not completely empty of himself in a way, then the same mathematical notes are not carrying the same vibration.
No question.
So to say that music is mathematical or all mathematics, my impression is, given our contemporary idea of mathematics, actually slightly denudes its feeling content. To say the word three is not the same thing as to say Trinity.
Yes.
And
Exactly.
therefore, so I slightly wonder about the usage of this expression.
Maybe there is more than merely the arrangement of the vibrations. Maybe it also has to include the whole mathematics of the human being who is receiving it. He is also part of the entire process. It isn't just disembodied numbers which are floating around in the universe.
See, for example, when Madame de Salzmann said that Gurdjieff brought a science of being, it seems to me here is a mathematics of being that is being addressed,
Yes.
really, in a way.
Really, when a human being is composing properly or performing properly or listening properly, isn't this really open to that great and such a deep subject of attention?
Exactly.
I think,
Yeah.
yes.
We should actually raise this with Larry here, the whole question of attention. In a way, really all music, it seems to me, is in a way directing attention. Even the really completely pop music is manipulating attention. All propaganda is manipulating attention. But clearly this is not the intention of the Gurdjieff music. And I would really like you very much to speak to this issue when we say that attention is really or the development of attention. I would have almost used the word freeing of attention is really at the heart of all of Gurdjieff's teaching, so that it's not that my mind would just go along with what the other person is trying to take me in, but that somehow I become in question. That to me seems to be quite different from manipulation of attention.
My own approach to it is not theoretical. It comes really from my own experience. And I have discovered it both as a listener and as a performer. And what I'm speaking of is, I think, doing exactly what you said, perhaps expressed in a slightly different way. For example, when I am playing, my principal occupation is what I would call getting out of the way.
Yes.
Suddenly, I have to completely allow all questions that have nothing to do with the matter at hand to retreat. And when this happens, this quality of attention, which allows the music to be, allows one to become the servant of the music and not its interpreter. I have a very vivid memory of an incident which demonstrated to me the limitations of my own capacity of attention with another capacity which is still miraculous in my eyes. There was a period when a group of us were playing regularly the Gurdjieff music for Madame de Salzmann. And I remember one Sunday afternoon in an apartment in New York, three of us were gathered with Madame. She was sitting in an armchair which was sort of in the crook of the piano, with her back to the keyboard, listening, and we would each come and play, and she would comment. So I was playing a piece, and I thought I was rather pleased with the way it was sounding. I thought it was rather good. And playing along, at a certain point, I suddenly realized to my horror that that for the last 10 or 12 bars, I had been thinking about something which had nothing to do with what we were doing. It was about something that I had to do next week and some business appointment or something like that. And, you know, I was playing. I didn't interrupt my play, and I suddenly caught myself, came to, as it were, and finished the piece in some form or other. I don't remember how it ended, but it ended. But it was generally unnoticeable. I mean, the whole thing, I didn't miss any notes. It all went smoothly. And so I finished, and she was quiet for a moment. And then Madame de Salzmann said, yes, that was quite good, she said. But tell me about 2 measures after the double bar, you know, where it modulates. Where did you go? Where were you? And then you got back just in time to finish. Well, this was the most miraculous sensitivity to other people's state, which I think she was famous for.
Yes.
Oh, right. What a wonderful story.
Miraculous.
Thank you so
Thank you
very
very
much.
much.
It was wonderful, Larry. Thank you.